What's going on, guys? It's Relate here, and in today's video we will be talking about the top 5 teams to use as a possible franchise team in MLB The Show 24. Now, the video I made before I made this video was the top 5 teams to rebuild, and that's a more simulation style experience for the user. But in the franchise, you got to get in and play the games. Damn it, I went into demo mode. Hold up. Now that this game has stopped being stupid, simulation style experiences for the user are really all about developing young prospects and really going far down the line, 10 years, 5-10 years in a short span of time. But franchise, you got to get in, play the games, so you need a different type of team to have that experience, because the last thing you want to do is just to be upset at the game for months on end playing with crappy players, because it gets old real quick, especially when you're trying to have a realistic franchise. So, without further ado, here are the top 5 teams to use in franchise mode for your franchise team in MLB The Show 24. Now, there will be some repeats in here from the rebuild video because, you got to rebuild in franchise. You can't be doing the Dodgers for your franchise team or your rebuild team. So at number 5, we do have the Oakland Athletics. My favorite part about possibly having a franchise with this team is that you can use the fact that they're moving to Vegas and build a new stadium in Vegas and have that be your big storyline in your mind and in your world, in your franchise. But as I went through in the last video, this team is not good at all. You have Paul Blackburn, who's a solid starter, but really is a stopgap and not going to do much for you. But looking forward to the future, you have guys like Ken Waldichuk, who isn't bad, who you can develop. Luis Medina could do something for you. You're going to have to draft a lot for this team and sign a lot. The budget is not high at all. This team isn't good, frankly. The biggest story for your franchise is moving them to Vegas and seeing what you can do with them. Another thing that makes this franchise for the A's interesting is the fact that you're in the AL West and you have to deal with the likes of the Rangers and the Astros and the up-and-coming Mariners. So that adds to the challenge of this franchise. And franchise shouldn't be easy. That's why you pick these teams that aren't that good. You can definitely build around somebody like Tyler Soderstrom, who can play first, left, and right, because you have Langoliers here, who is your catcher for the foreseeable future. You have good catching prospects like Daniel Susac. Noda's got some power for the first couple years. You do have Zach Geloff, who's pretty good fielder, very young, definitely a guy you can build around, especially with a low budget that the A's have. You have a young guy here in Jacob Wilson, who you can develop through the minors. He can play a little outfield, a little shortstop, so he's definitely a guy that you want to keep around. This team's not bad defensively, but it is bad pretty much everywhere else. And that's the beauty of franchise. You get to build around Esteury Ruiz, who's really fast and can steal a lot of bases. But other than that, this team isn't good. Brent Rooker will give you 20-plus home runs per year, but you need to draft well. You need to sign strategically. And overall, it'll be pretty hard to get through the first couple years just because this team is so bad. But once you get through that point and you get some of these young guys in the league, this team turns really fun opportunity in Vegas for a possible championship winning franchise. So that is number 5. Now let's go to team number 4. At team number 4, we do have the Cincinnati Reds. Now the Reds have not been good for a very long time, so you can take that for what you will and become the GM of this poverty franchise. This has one of the lower budgets in the National League at $133 million. Looking at this team, there's a lot of young players that you can build around and play with, like Hunter Green, who throws really hard and he's fun to play with. Nick Lodolo, crafty lefty. You have guys like Andrew Abbott. I mean, there are young pitchers scattered all across this roster. Rick Lauder, nice prospect. Good prospect here in Chase Petty. Good prospect here in Connor Phillips. Ty Floyd even. I mean, you have prospects at starting pitching up the butt, right? You have solid relievers. I mean, this team can compete if you put a couple pieces together. You do have Alexis Diaz, who is one of the best young closers in the league, up and coming. So you can definitely keep him around. Tyler Stevenson, good catcher, great potential still. I mean, this team is young, and that's what makes this team fun. Spencer Steer, A potential. Christian Encarnacion, A potential. Matt McClain, B potential, 84. I mean, India still. You have Sal Stewart, A potential. Cam Collier, B potential. De La Cruz. I mean, you go through all these A potentials, and you still have Ellie De La Cruz, who is possibly one of the most fun players in all of baseball. You still have Noelvi Marte from the Mariners trade. And I mean, B and A potential go through all of this team, and that's what makes this so fun. So it's what can you add to this team that already has such good potential at the major league level. And when you play these games and you perform well with these players, that potential gets realized, and soon enough you have a great team on your hand where you don't have to pay anybody, and then you can dominate in the future. So this isn't as long of a rebuild as the Athletics could be, but it could be just as fun because the Reds are in a position with this young roster to really start competing quickly in the next few years. So I think this could be one of the better teams to have as your franchise team this year, and they're probably the most fun. But that's number 4. Now let's go to team number 3. At team number 3, we do have the number 1 spot from my favorite teams to rebuild in the last video that I made is the Colorado Rockies. Now, the most fun part about this is Nolan Jones. 25 years of age, 88 overall, can do anything. He has a huge arm from that right field spot. But other than that, this team is not good. You do have Ezekiel Tovar, who's a good fielder at shortstop and young. He's got good potential, but you have Chase Dolliner, who's a good prospect. I mean, I talked all about this roster in the last video, but really, outside of a couple prospects here and there, this team is not good. A lot of C potential, a lot of D potential, a lot of aging guys. And the problem with this roster is that it's bad, but it's bad in the NL West, where you have to deal with the Diamondbacks and the Padres and the Giants and the Dodgers. Like, you're going to really struggle, and you have to be aggressive with your $154 million team budget to sign guys away from the Giants and the Dodgers, who are always aggressive, and the Padres, who are aggressive, and the Diamondbacks, who have to be aggressive now after making the World Series last season. I mean, these teams are trying to compete, and the Rockies have just been content with 4th or 5th place in the NL West. And as the GM in your franchise mode, I know you guys won't be content with that. At least I hope not. So you have to draft well, be aggressive, sign well. Sterling Thompson is a solid prospect. I mean, you still have like Ryan McMahon, who can last a couple of years. But you need to move quickly, especially with Nolan Jones. I mean, you have him for a while, but he's already good. And the window has opened now, so now you have to attack. And that's what makes this franchise fun. Along with the fact that you're playing in Coors Field and you got to hit a bunch of home runs, and you know it's more fun when baseball is scoring a lot of points on each side. That also is a cherry on top. So they fall into my 3 spot. Now let's go to team number 2. Number 2 is a team that used to be really good not too long ago, but has since been casted away in the American League East, and that is the Boston Red Sox. They still have a huge budget of $192.5 million, but the problem is that the Blue Jays are top 10 in talent, the Rays are top 10 in talent, the Yankees have unlimited money, and the Orioles have been great as of late. And this team has just fallen to last. But this team is still really interesting. You have Rafael Devers, who's 27, and you just signed him to a huge deal. You have Kenley Jansen, who's aging. Chris Martin, who's aging. Yoshida, who you just signed to a big deal. I mean, this team is fun, but it's really competitive in the AL East, and that is the problem that you run into, especially with a crappy pitching staff. Almost slipped up there on this team. Nick Pivetta as your ace isn't really going to do anything for you. You do have Tanner Huck. You have Brian Bayo, who you could develop. He's not horrible. And then in terms of your prospects, you got one good pitching prospect here, so You need to attack that position. You have a lot of aging relievers here. Liam Hendricks, Chris Martin, Lucas Letke. Even Garrett Whitlock is now 27, but you have him forever. You can definitely build around him as your future setup guy, possible future closer. But I think all of these guys are D, maybe except one or two. I mean, that's pretty bad. So this team is really interesting because you need to draft well, but you also have all that money into these aging veterans, and a lot of them are actually expiring, like Kenley Jansen and a couple of those relievers. I mean, 16 in the books for Jansen can go into somebody next year. At catcher, you do have Kyle Teal, who's a top prospect behind the plate, so you can develop him. It's pretty bad catching room, so Teal can go up the ranks pretty quickly in your franchise. You do have Tristan Casas, who you can build around, a nice hitter at first base. Dahlbeck also with some potential. Got some young guys here up the middle. Vaughn Grissom, Nick York, Romy Gonzalez. Like I said, Devers still at third base, really solid. Should be your star for years to come. You still have Trevor Story, but the problem with Story is he's tied up to this 5-year, $100 million contract pretty much. And he's a C potential, 31 years old, at 76 overall. I mean, what are you going to do with Trevor Story? Are you going to cut him? Like I said, you have Yoshida, but the outfield prospects really aren't much outside of Rafella here, who's more of a utility guy anyway. I mean, this is a really interesting roster. And this team used to be good, not too long ago. 5, maybe less years ago. This team was at the top of the AL East competing with the Yankees every year while the Orioles sucked. And now they have no prospects left, aging veterans, and a lot of money to spend. So you can really morph this team into really anything you want it to. And it probably won't take that long, but it will be fun and challenging, and probably one of the hardest divisions in baseball. So that is team number 2, but they are not number 1. And I will show you who that team is now. At number 1, in terms of teams that you should use for franchise mode, in my opinion, is the Los Angeles Angels. Now, they just lost Shohei Ohtani. That's already a huge storyline to the Dodgers of all teams, which is just down the road. But you have Mike Trout. Who's going to finally get Mike Trout the World Series that he needs? He barely has even been to the playoffs in his career. This man is one of the greatest baseball players of all time. He's 32 years old. He's got 7 years left on his deal. He will most likely retire at the end of the deal. And what are you going to do around him? You need to get Mike Trout a championship. Operation Mike Trout Championship. But the problem is that this team is not ready at all to be a championship level contender. At pitcher, you do have Reed Detmers, who's young and needs to develop still, but he's got a potential. You do have Sandoval, who's solid. But other than that, even in the farm system, it's not looking good. So you need to draft well. Outside of Detmers, maybe Sandoval, maybe Chase. I mean, you're not looking at much here in this whole roster at starting pitcher. At reliever, you do have Matt Moore, but he's 34. Luis Garcia's 37. You do have Robert Stevenson on a huge deal for no reason. There's a lot of bad contracts on this Angels team. And if you're going to be realistic, you might just have to cut him and eat the money, which isn't good at all. But you do have Ben Joyce, who's young, a former Tennessee standout. I mean, what are you going to do with Ben Joyce? Possible future closer. You have Suarez, who's probably one of the better long relievers in the division. Estevez is your closer. It's not amazing. A lot of aging veterans when you really need to open up a bigger window with younger talent on this roster. You do have Logan O'Hoppe, who's a solid catcher, B potential, 76 overall. You can definitely build around him as a good catcher for the future. But this farm system is horrible. I'm not seeing any top prospects on this team. You do have Nolan Schonel, who played in 29 games last year and has a potential and could be something for you at first base, possibly to replace a guy like Ohtani from the hitting side. You do have Brandon Drury, but it's only for this year. Do you re-sign Brandon Drury? Do you trade him at the deadline? There's just so many interesting ways that you can take this franchise. You have Luis Rengifo, who's one of the most interesting players, I think, in the MLB. A utility guy that's got great contact, good power, solid defense. You have Willie Calhoun, who's a failed prospect. You have this situation with Anthony Rendon. You owe him north of $100 million over the next 3 seasons. I mean, and he's a 68 overall at 33 years of age. It's one of the worst contracts ever in MLB history. I mean, that's horrible. And on top of that, you have nothing at third base. You do have Zach Neto at shortstop, who's a young guy. It's really a perfect mix for a great franchise. It's fun. You have guys that you can develop, but you have money issues and money problems and aging veterans and superstars. You look at left field, you have Taylor Ward, who's really solid with the bats. You have Joe Adele, who still has some potential left, but he hasn't really done anything yet in the MLB. You have Mike Trout, and you have Mickey Moniak in right field. But you lost out on Ohtani. They barely did anything in free agency. And you're on top of that, you have to deal with Houston and Seattle. And, I mean, Oakland. I mean, you'll beat Oakland. But you have to deal with Texas, who just won the World Series. Like, those are 3 up-and-coming teams with windows that are large, maybe except Houston. And you have Mike Trout, probably still the best player in baseball, or at least one of them. Just sitting here without a World Series, without major playoff experience. And this organization has just been ran real horrible. And that is why they are my favorite team to possibly be your franchise team for MLB The Show 24. And they will be my franchise team this season. So be on the lookout for the Los Angeles Angels franchise upcoming, most likely starting tomorrow. But with that, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment on what you think about this list. Put your input on who you think you guys want to have as your franchise team and why. I want to spark up conversations with y'all in the comments, and I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.